Okay, so here we are again, and we just got done explaining before about retopology and how I would go about doing that. And here's the end result. Basically, after a couple breaks here and there, and a few minutes, I ended up with this. And as you notice that before, where the multicolored parts were, they're all now combined into one solid mesh, which is denoted by the green. It doesn't look all that nice, I understand that, but I'm going to relax that just a little bit so that it kind of follows the contour just a little bit more. But this is what I'm looking for, because it doesn't have near as many polygons as the object underneath, the object that I'm retopologizing underneath. And let's just go ahead and hide that. And then this is the general shape that I get. So this is really what I'm looking for. And it may have slightly more polygons, I'm not quite sure, than the other one that I had optimized that we started out with before we subdivided it into all those other little squares and things like that. It may have more polygons than that, but it's not as faceted. It has a better flow of topology from one point to the next. And so that allows me to do quite a few things a lot easier. And one of those things that we're going to get into is called UV mapping. So UV mapping is basically a way to put an image map that we're going to make here shortly onto a mesh. And I can already see a problem here before we get into it, because I had divided this at one point in time, and it kind of jacked something up here. Yeah, that's what happened. Let me see here. I don't know what the best way, because I'm thinking that something else is kind of screwed up too. Along the lines here, so I'm gonna try to fix that, but I can't. Oop, maybe I could. I'll just go from here to here really quick to keep that flow going. We might just leave that little sucker there, because I got to a point where I had to subdivide something, split it up a little bit, and I knew it ran a ring around there, and then I decided that I was going to end up deleting that ring because I didn't want it, and now I should have kept it, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, this is pretty much a rough approximation of what's happening in the mesh, right, or the flow of the mesh. I got nothing there. Okay, and so back to UV mapping. UV mapping is going to allow me to take a three-dimensional object and flatten it so that I can use a flat image to project onto it. And I know that doesn't make too much sense, but as we go on in this unwrapping part, because we have to unwrap our mesh in order to make the UV map, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to cut little pieces apart out of this thing, and then the computer's going to flatten it down into a flat object that we can later on pin an image map to. So how we do that is we go into selecting edge loops, and hopefully I've got it divided up pretty well. I usually start with a loop so that I can terminate some cuts around the edges and stuff. And as you see, what it's doing is that it's cutting up this, it's highlighting certain areas of it. It says that this area is now isolated from the rest of it, and it creates what's called a UV island, or what are they calling it now? I don't know. People change names for it all the time. Um, I don't know why that didn't get connected. There's got to be something that is missing in there. And I think I see the problem right there. That didn't get um, connected. This radius thing is really getting to be a pain in the butt. There we go. And see, that's why I like 3D coders, because it's highlighting my islands as I go, so I can tell whether or not, I have a continuous surface to deal with while I'm UV mapping this stuff. And I took the simple parts first, and I'm continuing to take the simple parts and defining those areas, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at where I should cut this everywhere else. So as you look over here, what you can see is that there's going to be some little things that are flashing up here, and this is basically the mess of this main object, the green part that I'm on right now, that it's trying to flatten out. And right now it's telling me that everything is kind of either stretched or compressed and laying on top of one another, and so that's no good. Over here you can see that that's not too stretched out or anything, and it's not a big mess. It doesn't look like it's all a crumpled up piece of paper. But this is what's happening, is that I'm taking this complex shape and I'm flattening it out. So I have to continue to make cuts in order to flatten all this stuff out and come up with a good solution for the UVs. And all I'm doing is I'm just defining the loops of each of these areas and cutting them out. And a lot of times when you get too many cuts and you're not hiding them, what happens is that you get seams. But I'm going to kind of throw caution to the wind here and just put those seams in it anyway, because there's certain types of images that you can get away with, bit depths and stuff like that, that we probably won't get into too much, that allow us to, actually take advantage of not really having too many seams. Yeah, that was probably a little too much extra, cutting there, but it ends up working out. And so I keep on doing this stuff, trying to separate one part of the mesh from another, because each one of them is going to have their own little problems. And if I don't like the mesh or the UVs, I can easily get back into this and redefine where I want my loops to cut this up. And then what I'm going to do is pop a seam right in here, maybe. And so that kind of flattens it out. You can see over in some of these areas, just above that yellow part, that there's something overlapping something else. So sometimes if I want to get rid of that overlap somewhere else, I can do this, but it's not really fixing that. That's a little better to get rid of some stretching. I don't usually like to do that many seams on something, but these are complex shapes. And I know there are people that are just like rolling around and kicking themselves right now that are sitting up here watching this, that, probably know what they're doing better than I do. But tough. That's how it's working out for me. So that's how we're going to do it. And I notice that there's some problems here that I can take care of that we don't need to have problems with. I don't know how that gets in there like that, but sometimes it does, depending on what exactly I'm doing, or how I cut certain things. We're going to clear that section. I'm going to get into the edges part here, and this edge is just, the radius is too big. We'll get in here. I try to get things to kind of flow continuously through there. Yes, I know. See, and then when we do that, then we start getting into problems, and then I have to remark some stuff. There we go. And the thing about 3D Code is that it's not going to allow me to destroy the UV map as I go. Right now the UV is temporary. UV consequently stands for X and Y. The reason why they called it UV is so that you don't confuse X and Y with your other stuff, like when you're creating your objects. So as you're creating your object, you're dealing with an XYZ coordinate system, and you don't want to confuse your XYs with your mappings of the UVs. That's not too terribly bad, but that could be better like that. That could be better like that. This can kind of be better like this a little bit. And as you see, it just takes a little bit of time, and I know like I said, I'm throwing caution to the wind, but that doesn't look too stretched out. So basically, you'll notice that in some of these maps there'll be darker red areas and lighter red areas. And basically what that shows is the amount of compression and stretching there are, or that's happening within the mesh. That is happening to the map, because this thing is three-dimensional. It's in three-dimensional space. So basically what it's doing is it's unwrapping it, like I said before. It's unwrapping that and putting it on a flat plane. And when you do that, you're going to kind of stretch or compress certain parts of it. It's like when you unwrap the world and put it into a 2D map that we unfold and look at every day, there's distortion. Everything else has some sort of problem with it. Or everything on that map is kind of like a false representation of the actual world. So basically, that's what we're doing here. Is we're taking the world of this object and we're flattening it out. And so I'm just kind of trying to show this thing that there's certain seams that I don't want showing. And if you can hear my cat in the background, I apologize. He's going to bug the crap out of me through this whole thing. But that's what we're doing, is we're taking the world and we're flattening it out so that we can make an image map. Okay, so that's about it. And then I go in here and I tell it to go ahead and unwrap that. It takes some calculation, and now we have all these little blues. Like I said, blues is a little bit of compression. Red, I think, is a little bit of stretching, but 3D Code is very sensitive on how it views the map. So sometimes these aren't really compressed or stretched that much. And it gives us a checkerboard preview to see how much distortion there actually is in the mesh. And there doesn't look like there's a whole lot of distortion, so that's a pretty good map. But I got seams all over the place. And I know that seems like it's a really bad practice, and in general it is, but I'm going to be using a certain type of image bit depth or whatever like that so that we don't really see that too much. If we go ahead and just save out this object now, I'm going to export the retopo mesh, which is just going to export that new mesh, and it's going to export the UV map that we'll get into a little bit later. That's all we have to do from here. So basically the next step is baking the high resolution mesh into the low resolution mesh so that we can take advantage of what's going on there. But first, before we do that, I'm going to see if there's any problems with it. There may be. Actually, I'll show you how that's fixed later on if there are any problems. But that's it for the UV part. Now we're going to go ahead and bake maps, and that'll be short. So, till next time.